Hey there friends, how are y'all doing? Welcome back to my channel. I am your girl, Terry. If you're new here, welcome. And if you've been rocking with me for a while, welcome back. Today I have a hot take for you. So I've really been leaning into this whole golden years thing, and I found out that I'm actually, in certain instances, considered a senior citizen. So I'm 51 years old. And I guess you're like fully solidified as a senior citizen when you're 55. So right now I'm dipping my pinky toe into the senior citizen pool. When I hit 55, I will be all the way in it. So anyway, I'm having fun, y'all. I'm doing research and just trying to navigate this thing as best I can so that I can make it to where it's not scary, because getting older can be scary, right? So anyway, I have a topic for you all that I am so excited to share, and that is dating when you are a senior citizen. And there's this whole notion of together but separate. And if you don't know what I mean by that, stay tuned. So I came across this article the other day, and it's entitled "The New Reality of Dating Over 50. Men want to live together and women don't." And I thought that was so interesting. I was like, really? So more men are wanting to find a companion or a partner and live together, whereas on the other hand, women are just kind of like, hold on a second. We can be friends, we can be companions, we can be partners, but I want to have my own space and you have your own space. And I tell you what, this topic piqued my interest because I just bought a home. Right? And most of the men that I date, they are either my age or older. I don't really date younger men, right? So in a lot of cases, the men that I meet and that I date, they have their own homes, they're well established and so forth. And so you'll understand here in a bit why women kind of lean more towards, I'll keep my stuff, stay in my space. You keep your stuff, stay in your space. I'm not of that mindset as of yet, but as the years go on, if I continue to be single, I might start leaning towards that direction myself. All right, so the article says, as society evolves and the dynamics of relationships shift, the dating landscape for those aged 50 and older has undergone significant changes. A growing number of seniors are exploring romantic connections later in life, seeking companionship, love, and support during their golden years. And I was so happy to read that, because I think for a lot of people that are younger, they think that if you're older or old, dating and relationships really are not for you. You know, that's a young person's game. But I'm happy to read here that there are quite a few of us who are in that 50 plus range who still are out there and hopeful and looking for love and companionships and, you know, in some cases, marriage. So that was comforting to see. All right, let's keep on. However, recent trends reveal a noteworthy divergence in expectations among men and women in this age group. While many men express a desire to cohabitate, women often prefer to maintain their independence. This article delves into the reasons behind this disparity and the implications for senior dating. Okay, so the article goes on to say, in previous generations, traditional norms dictated that seniors would settle down and live together in a committed partnership. However, contemporary views on aging emphasize the importance of individual fulfillment and quality of life. Many older adults now approach dating with an open mind, seeking meaningful connections without necessarily adhering to conventional relationship models. Okay, so I do think that is quite interesting. And I think part of it is that I'm more of a traditional woman. So I grew up in a household with both parents. My parents have been married for 50 plus years. And we were brought up in a traditional household. You know, my dad was the provider, the primary provider. My mom, she also worked, but she was more of the person that took care of the inside of the home, the domestic task and whatnot. And my dad took care of the outside. So I had a very traditionally normal upbringing. I shouldn't say normal, but a traditional upbringing. And that, because I'm rooted in that, that's kind of the direction that I lean in now. I myself am divorced, and I've been dating off and on. And in my mind, what I want is to find a companion and a partner to where we get married. And as part of that marriage, we cohabitate, we live together, and we combine our assets. So more on that here in a little bit, because I want to share some of the feedback that I've received, some in agreement with my mindset, but some a little bit of the opposite, and some in the middle of the road, right? It's kind of like, okay, so I'm cool with whatever it is that you want to do when I've been out dating. Okay. For many men over 65, the desire to live together stems from several factors. Companionship, as solitude becomes more pronounced with age, many men seek the comfort and companionship of a partner. Living together provides a sense of security and emotional support that enriches both partners' lives. Now, this is interesting because I feel like quite often, much later or earlier in life, right, when we're in the stage of dating and, maybe living together, marriage, when we're younger, it seems more like women are pushing and driving relationships more towards marriage, or at the very least, living together. So to see on the flip side that when men hit like 50 and older, they're the ones who want to push more for cohabitation, living together, and in some cases, marriage. So I thought it was interesting to see that there's a difference of opinion there when it comes to women that are much older. Shared responsibilities. Cohabitation offers practical advantages. Cohabitation offers practical advantages such as sharing household chores, financial responsibilities, and caregiving. Many men appreciate the collaborative aspects of living together, making daily life more manageable. Okay, and so for this one as well, quite a few of the men that I've met were the primary providers when they were previously married. So in some cases, the wife maybe worked part-time, or she didn't work at all, but after they separated or got divorced, then sometimes she maybe took half, or took, equal share of the resources. And it seems like not all the men, but some of the men are looking more for someone who is going to be in partnership, to where they're not bearing the financial load. They want someone who is going to pool their resources with them, as well as, and they know what comes along with that is, okay, if we're pulling our resources together, we're sharing in that financial responsibility. You're also going to share in the domestic responsibilities as well, right? Because I believe in that earlier dynamic, especially if their wife was a stay-at-home mom, she didn't have to work, and the trade-off was he took care of all the bills, all the financial responsibilities. Okay, changing social norms. With evolving attitudes towards relationships, men increasingly see cohabitation as a practical solution that allows couples to enjoy the benefits of companionship without the pressure of marriage. Now, so for this one, yeah, I get this one totally, right? Because if later in life, women really are not looking to get married at that point, because maybe they were in that situation where their former husband, former spouse took care of everything, and they got divorced, and she left with her portion of the resources, he left with his. And then also, let's say if she's a divorcee, right? She may not be as inclined to want to get married, right? Maybe she doesn't want to combine her resources with this man. So in some cases, I see where the guy is like, okay, women who are older are not going to be as inclined to want to get married, but they're probably looking for companionship the same as I am. So cohabitation would be the better option. All right, so let's talk about what us ladies want, okay? So Many women over 50 express a distinct preference for maintaining their independence. This inclination can be traced to several factors. Previous experiences. Many women in this age group have experienced long-term marriages or relationships and may prefer to retain their autonomy after years of being in partnership. They may be hesitant to compromise their personal space or routines again. Okay, so listen, I remember asking my mom, women at work, women that I know from church that have been married for a long time, and they said if anything happened to their spouse, there's no way they would get married again. Now, that's not to say that they're not happy in their current marriages, but I think, and not that I think, I know, when you get married, you lose some of your autonomy, you lose some of your independence. And I feel like that happens a lot with women, maybe not so much with men. Maybe in a sense they do, but a lot of times women kind of put their desires, their hopes, their dreams, their goals, or whatever on the back burner when they get married because they're more focused on the marriage, taking care of their husbands, taking care of the children. And, you know, when they finally, I don't want to say finally. And so when they either divorce after a long period of time being married, or when they lose a spouse, there's a lot of relearning that has to happen. So, for example, I was married for 10 years. And that's small in comparison to someone who was married for 50 plus years, you know, or maybe even 20 and so on. After that 10-year period, I had to relearn who I was because I was no longer a wife and I was no longer a full-time parent. I was sharing in that responsibility 50-50. So I had to retrain my brain and figure out who I was and regain my independence as a single woman, right? And so I can just imagine the transformation that has to happen, the mindset shift, especially if you had a spouse, if you're a woman, you had a spouse that took care of the financial responsibilities, that if anything went wrong in a house, they were the ones to address it. You know, you really leaned on your spouse for those things. So you're having to learn a whole lot. Even if you're left with enough finances to take care of yourself, it's all the other things, right, that you're having to learn as a now independent woman. Not that you can't be independent when you're married, but you know what I'm talking about. And so I can see how for women, they want to retain that autonomy. And there's probably a little bit of fear and apprehension about getting married again or moving in with somebody, because I'm going to just say it, you might have to unravel some of that, right? How do you integrate your life into someone else's without losing that autonomy and independence? Okay, so the financial independence, women today often have their own financial resources and stability, which can further encourage their desire for solo living. They may be more inclined to protect their assets and not mix finances with a partner. All right, and so I'm thinking about this more and more, right? Because I am a financially independent woman. I own a home now. I have investments and savings and all that stuff. So I'm at a point in my life now where I'm thinking more about legacy. I'm thinking even more strongly about wealth building. And when I think about that, I'm not thinking of it in terms of building with a partner. I'm thinking of it in terms of building it myself and leaving that legacy for my daughter. So that is where you start thinking about, okay, do prenups need to come into play? You know, how do you retain the assets that you want to have remaining for your heirs? You don't want to risk losing that, right? So it's kind of like, how do you navigate that? And I know that you can. But again, that kind of ties into that whole financial independence thing. Okay, and then it says here, personal growth and fulfillment. Many women, this stage of life is an opportunity for personal exploration and growth. They may wish to devote time to hobbies, friendships, and travel rather than adjusting to cohabitation. Okay, so personal growth and development. I'll just give you an example. So when I was married, my daughter's father was not into traveling all that much. He didn't like flying. And I found that after we got divorced, I traveled more than I had traveled within those 10 years, within the first 3 years of being divorced, because I grew up traveling. That's not something that he did. But being able to just decide that I wanted to go somewhere when I wanted to go without having to run it by somebody, I could just do that. I took a rock climbing class, right? Not saying I couldn't have done that when I was married, but I didn't have to try and negotiate. I didn't have to like say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. What I'm trying to say is you don't have to run anything by anybody. So whatever it is that you want to do, you just go be free. Your time is your own. And so if I want to go and learn how to make whatever, that is up to me. I don't have to run that by anyone. And then also spending time with friends. I can spend as much time with my girlfriends as I want. If I want to go travel to see my friends, I can do that as well. If I want to pick up a hobby, guess what? I am free to do that. Again, not saying you can't do that when you're in a partnership with someone, but then you kind of have to work around adjusting if you're deciding to live with someone or you're cohabitating with someone. The disparity in relationship desires presents unique challenges for seniors entering the dating scene. Men may feel rejected or confused by women's reluctance to cohabitate, while women may struggle to communicate their needs without discouraging potential partners. Effective communication and mutual understanding are essential for navigating this new reality. Many older adults are finding ways to reconcile these differences by considering alternative arrangements. Some couples opt for living apart together, where they maintain separate residences while enjoying a committed relationship. This arrangement allows couples to enjoy companionship without sacrificing their independence. Okay, so this is very interesting, right? Because I met a man a couple years ago, and I expressed to him that I was dating with the intention of being married again, getting married again. And so he lived in another city, maybe about an hour and a half, 2 hours away. And so his question for me, he was like, okay, I'm open to that. And he said, so is your expectation that we would live together? Or would I continue to live in my city and you live in yours? And when he put that question out there for me, I was just kind of like, hold on a second, what? And it's that whole living apart together phenomenon. And I never really considered that. And I don't want to do that. That's not for me. I know that will work for some people because again, it's like, who's going to pick up and move? Or do you both decide to live, or do you both decide to move somewhere? And so even if you're in the same city, right? I know a woman at church, she had her house, her husband had his house. Neither one of them wanted to budge on selling their homes or whatever. They didn't want to buy a home together or live together. And so they would get to, it's almost like extended dating, but they were married. They had the paperwork, I guess. But to me, that is interesting. But people make it work however they make it work. But again, I just find it really fascinating that later in life, women are the ones who are like, you know what? I'm not so crazy about the idea of living with a man. I know that I've spoken to some older women as well. They're like, I don't want a man coming in and messing up my house. And I have to admit, like some of these guys, I don't know how this is going to sound, but some of these men were well trained by their wives. So you go to their house and it is clean, it's spotless, everything is in its place. They have beautiful homes. But then you have some, their homes are freaking trashed out. It's scary. And so it's just kind of like, if your living style or your lifestyle is not similar, do you want to go through that whole process of training someone? I don't know, it's weird. And then like little things like leaving out the toilet seat is so annoying. Do they leave toothpaste on the sink? I don't know. The more I'm talking about this, anyway, I'm getting off topic. But for me, it's the whole, how do you integrate your lives together so that cohabitating is not such a turnoff for women? I really don't know. I'd be curious if there's anyone out there who is in a situation where they're living apart together. Any of my viewers, if you're doing that, please kind of share a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on this whole women later in life not wanting to cohabitate and not wanting to get married versus men who most likely want to cohabitate, if not get married, so that they can have that whole companionship aspect, or so they can have that whole companionship component? Okay, so lastly, it says here, the new reality of dating over 50 reveals a complex interplay of desires and expectations for men and women. While many men are eager to live together, women often prioritize their autonomy and independence. By fostering open conversations and understanding each other's perspectives, seniors can navigate the dating landscape and create fulfilling relationships that respect individual desires. As attitudes towards aging continue to evolve, this emerging dynamic presents opportunities for love, companionship, and personal growth in the golden years. So I just had a light bulb go off. There were at least 2 men that I have dated in the past 3 years where for them, 2 of them in particular, wanted me to move in like pretty quickly. And for one of them, I did move in. Things moved just a little too fast. Would never do that again. And then the other one just kind of alluded to me wanting to be at their place more than I was at mine. And I feel like the danger in that is that you can easily lose yourself when you decide to do something like that. So again, you kind of lose your autonomy because it's kind of like you're not on your own, I don't want to say playing field, but you're not in your own environment. You're in someone else's. And maybe it would be different if, you 2 met in the middle and got a new place together. I don't know. But it does seem like older men kind of want you to move in or cohabitate with them a lot more quickly than I remember back in my younger years of dating. And then there were probably 2 where, they both kind of lived an hour and a half to 2 hours away. And for one, we kind of talked about a schedule for when they would be here and I could be there, but we still had our own spaces to go back to. And then the other one, he was just kind of like, okay, whatever you want to do. But if you want to live in your city and I continue to live in mine, that's totally fine. So it's just, it runs the gamut. It really does. It runs the gamut. But I think what this article is saying is that it seems like men do value cohabitation a lot more as they get older, because that really has been my experience. In some cases, they talk about marriage as well, but definitely the cohabitation piece. So that's all I have for you today. What do you think about this topic? What do you think? I'm interested to hear from you. Leave your comments down in the comment section, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.